stranger. We used to moan about the rain. The bizarrely attired weather people, honestly, why did they dress like that, would apologize for it, because it got us wet. It ruined our hair and played havoc with our very important, predictable plans. But do you remember how good it could feel? Especially in the woods, when the leaves glistened as if they were singing in the shower. I never thought I'd miss the rain, but if I could do anything right now, I'd go outside and just stand in it. And then there would be a storm. A brilliant, bright, dazzling storm with thunderous bangs and forks of light that would leave my hair standing on end, making me feel alive and part of the world in a huge, inexplicable way. My friend Souza was cool if it started raining on her. She would just laugh at her hair going frizzy when most girls would have gone mad. It's funny thinking about it. I always thought she didn't care about how she looked, but if her hair went curly when it got wet, then she must have taken the time to straighten it to begin with. I wish I could tease her about that. Tell her she must be a girl after all. I just told the fire I was going to do a rain dance, and she wasn't impressed. I don't think she'd like to get wet. Ha! The day after the special announcement, just waking up in my room with the sun shining through the window onto the bedside table, felt like an event. Before, I'd not have noticed it. We sat around the breakfast table like zombies. Mom's eyes were shiny, and she kept hugging me and Dad. We all said inadequate things like, "How bizarre," and "I can't believe it." Breakfast TV was full of people who knew what they were talking about. The Prime Minister came on to tell us to treat the days between now and the referendum as business as usual, to ensure the economy was in a fit state to deal with whatever outcome the people chose. He made references to wartime determination and keeping a stiff upper lip. Dad laughed darkly and said, "Well, we wouldn't want the economy to suffer with the world about to end and all." Mom didn't want me to go to school, but I insisted. I reminded her that the Prime Minister had said any change to the norm would be seen as a crime to pervert the course of peace. Really, I just wanted to see my friends. The feeling in the air when I arrived reminded me of a non-uniform day, or the day before the summer holidays. There was a hum of hyper-excitement floating around like a drug. I passed the pretty girls, a melodramatic mess of hugging and crying. The sixth formers were frantically snogging each other's faces off, apart from one who leant against the wall, apparently forgotten. The emos, for the first time, didn't look out of place. It was a relief to see Souza and Ash in our normal meeting point by the drinks machine, talking calmly. Souza was gutted that she'd missed having a vote, as her 13th birthday was a couple of weeks away. She said it was obvious which way her parents would go. Her dad had been on the team that developed the machine. Ash said his dad, one of the hippie types, was leading a campaign for a third option that would allow people and nature to live in harmony. He said we should abstain from voting because the choice we'd been given was ridiculous and impossible, just like the society that created the problem. Ash was always lecturing us about the environment, telling us how evil we were to use bleach. I thought it was weird he looked so smug. If he actually cared, shouldn't he be sorry to be right? Souza said he was talking rubbish anyway, that her dad had said the third option was impractical. A half-baked fantasy created by a load of stoned bums. I watched as my two best friends began to make disagreeable sounds, to distance themselves. They looked each other up and down in a way that friends never should. Mom told me once that granite is both hard and brittle. I always thought that was odd, because how can something be strong and then just crumble? I suppose Souza and Ash had turned out like that. It wasn't nice to see. When the bell rang, the teachers didn't seem to mind that nobody moved to go to class. They were so busy talking to each other in confidential voices. Eventually, a lack of anything better to do led us to maths. Miss Swan, always strict yet with a sparkle in her eye, was resolute to the idea of business as usual. It felt good to pretend nothing had happened, to lose myself in equations, looking for answers I actually had a chance of finding. But at the end, Miss Swan said in a voice I hadn't heard before that she was going away to visit her mother. This would be our last lesson with her for the time being. Before we left, she hesitated, as if about to say something else, but then shook her head and thanked us for being good students. It was a strange feeling walking out of that classroom, possibly for the last time. It was as if the goodbyes had started to happen before anybody was ready. In English, we were told to write poems about the referendum. Although I normally liked writing, my head was so full of questions I could hardly manage to form a sentence. We went around the room. People read out their work, some raving on about nature, others picturing a world with the machine in various grisly ways. When it came to my turn, Mrs. Coombs, who always reminded me of a wise owl, asked what I had to say. I felt embarrassed to admit I hadn't written anything. I had mainly been thinking about Teddy. Sorry. It's just too big, I said, feeling tears well up. There was a titter of laughter and I heard somebody say, "Weak!" But Mrs. Coombs took her glasses off. Her face made a sad shape and she just nodded. When we finally made it to physics, Mr. Champion was waiting at the front of the classroom, his white hair standing on end even more than normal, and his glasses that had been broken since I could remember giving him a strange, startled cockerel look. I had always liked him for his style of mad professor and tendency to go off course with the curriculum to teach us things we didn't expect to know. A habit I heard other teachers whispering would get him into trouble one day. He waited patiently until the hum of conversation had died down and nodded to see us all sat straight-backed, waiting for the lesson. Then he walked over to the blackboard and wrote in huge white letters, "The end is nigh," before turning around to ask, "Any questions?" Finally, the bell rang to tell us it was the end of the day. My shoulders sagged. My friends were looking at each other murderously, and the air was so thick with trouble brewing I felt short of breath. The storm clouds didn't help. When a huge streak of lightning crashed over my head, I waved goodbye to my friends, not even thinking that I might never see them again. That night, I went to my room to see what was going on with Facebook when I heard Mom say, "Can he hear us?" And Dad reply, "No, I just checked. The door's shut," which it had been until Teddy nudged it open on his way in. I'm not a bad teenager, I promise, but seriously, would you have shut the door and not listened? I'm pretty sure you'd have done as I did, which was creep into the hallway so I could hear more. Mom was crying, and Dad was trying to comfort her with one of his stupid phrases. Everything will be okay in the end. If it's not okay, then it's not the end. I mean, doesn't everybody know that happy endings are made up? The Little Mermaid actually died, and Sleeping Beauty woke up raped with 2 kids. That's not what I call okay. I don't think Mom thought so either, because her voice sounded as if she'd had enough. Oh, for goodness sake, Harold, stop using those stupid words that mean nothing. Do you really think you're setting a good example to your child, pulling the wool over your own eyes and not accepting a bloody, tragic situation when it's staring you in the face? Our child is not going to get to grow up, or will grow up in a world that sounds absolutely horrendous, surrounded by death. I decided I didn't want to hear anymore, so I shut the door and sat on the bed for ages, stroking Teddy. Everything I'd known as solid, everything that made me feel safe, was crashing down around me. It was all too much to take in. Teddy seemed to understand, because he made a grunting sound and cuddled tight against me until I fell asleep.